Hi there, this is Robert Wieland with the Sophos Incident Response Team. In this video, we're going to be looking at a Sophos Central Console where there's suspicion that data exfiltration has taken place recently. First, we're going to go to the Live Discover menu where we'll be able to run some queries against the systems that are suspected of being involved in the data exfil. We want to start with a data lake query called search for network traffic data. And we want to search for systems that have a local IP of 10.10. And then last octet, we're just going to leave that as a wildcard. And we'll search for the last 30 days. Great, that's returned some data. Let's export it to Excel and take a look. Let's sort by processes being run by the administrator. And here we can see that on July the 31st, that rclone was executed. So rclone is a file transfer tool that is often abused by ransomware threat actors. So now that we've sorted it just to look for only the rclone executions, we can see that those took place on the file server on July 31st. And we can see the IP addresses associated as well as the Sophos process ID and also the SHA-256 hash. What we can do is we can copy this and see what exactly is this file. Is it actually rclone or is it something else? So you can see here we're on VirusTotal. I have entered the hash from the Excel spreadsheet here, and we can see that we've got positive confirmation that this is indeed rclone that we're dealing with. So if we go back to our spreadsheet that we collected from the data lake earlier, we can see that it's captured a number of IP addresses as well that were related to that rclone process. So we're just going to check that against VirusTotal to see who that IP address is registered to. All right, so we entered that on VirusTotal. If we go to details, we can see here that this IP address is registered to mega.co.nz, and Mega is a cloud storage service that a threat actor use quite frequently in their exfiltration. So this lines up with the typical MO that we would see in many ransomware cases. Going back to the spreadsheet, we can see that the folder that's being interacted with is called C data. So we probably want to understand what is it that's contained here because that looks to be what was exfiltrated. So the next thing we'll do is look at what data is contained here. So the query we're going to run is called file attributes and metadata. And this is a little bit different than the previous query that we ran because this is an EDR query. So it's actually touching forensic journals that are on the system itself as opposed to data that had been uploaded to the cloud to our data lake. And we just want to search for file server 1. So we're going to select that because now we're actually targeting data that's on this system itself, and we will run that query. Okay, great. So that query returned some data. Let's go up and see what it found. And we can see that there are 4 files within the data directory. And if we scroll over to the right a little bit, we can also see the size here. So it's in byte format. Hasn't been converted to gigabytes, but we can take a guess. This looks about 5.5 gigabytes. This is about almost 5, and then 5.5. So a significant amount of data within this directory. The next step is going to be to pivot over to another query and look at the network journals and see if we see a quantity of data that might match up to about the amount of bytes we see right here. All right, so let's go to the top of the screen. I'm going to look for another endpoint query called all traffic sent. So now we just need to update the start time and end time here to look at the time frame when rclone was running, which was 1400 hours, and we'll just look for 1 hour of time here. And run that query. Okay, we got some data back. Scroll up here and we can see that we have about 21 gigabytes of data that was exfiltrated. That about matches up with the bytes that we saw earlier where we were seeing approximately 5 gigabytes or more or less for 4 files. So could say that this could be accurate here. This looks like that there was data exfiltration because that matches up with that malicious rclone command that we saw and know was executed by the administrator account. Next, we're going to go back to the spreadsheet that we had from the first query that we ran on the data lake. And we're just going to grab the Sophos PID. So this is the process identifier. And we're going to run a query to look at what files in the file system were accessed by that process. So just go back here to all queries. And we're going to go with file system interactions for a Sophos PID. We know what time frame that we want to look at here. So we've entered in there July 31st, 1400, and then to 1500. That same 1 hour period of time, we want to know what did our clone do? What files did it touch when it was running on that day? So we'll run that. All right, so we got some data back here, still populating. And just because this is so much data to look at, we're going to export this to a CSV where we can manipulate the data a little easier. Okay, so now that we have the data in an Excel spreadsheet, let's filter it. And we can see here that the 4 files that were contained inside the C data directory are listed here. They were accessed by the rclone process. In this case, this query is not really all that interesting, but you could imagine that in a scenario where there was a lot more files in a directory that was targeted by a threat actor doing exfiltration where there was maybe 10,000 files, this query could be really helpful for identifying which files within that directory were indeed touched by the malicious process and which ones were not. The last query that we're going to run is one that will look at lateral movement, and it's called remote desktop logon event. So we'll go back to our all queries and search for that. And we know it was administrator, and don't know the source IP. So that's what we want to find out, and where did this logon come from? All right, so the query finished. So we can see that there was one authentication to file server 1 on July the 31st at 16:52 UTC with the administrator account coming from 10.10.5, which is a workstation in this network. So if we go back over to Excel here and look at the UTC time frame for when rclone was run, we can see that was actually shortly after that logon event. So if we go back and look at the time, 16:52, and go back to Excel, and we can see that it's 16:58. So the threat actor wasted no time in executing rclone after logging on as administrator. So there we go. Now we know where the threat actor came from. So that could mean some type of compromise on that system itself, potentially a phishing email or some other type of compromise that happened upstream, and then we would need to go to this system and then look for lateral movement coming from the VPN or some other system in the network that was initially compromised or previously compromised. To recap, we were able to use Sophos Central to pull data from the data lake as well as the EDR that was installed on file server 1 to investigate a data exfiltration incident. Most notably, we were able to determine the tool that was used for the exfiltration as well as the files that were touched by that process and the volume of data that was taken. So I hope that you found this video helpful. From me and the whole Sophos XOps team, take care and stay secure.